Hi beauties, it is Cara theBubblelush. So I had a lovely subscriber suggest that I should do a breastfeeding video comparing and contrasting my experiences with William and Hannah, and I thought that was a great idea. So I put it on Facebook. Hey guys, I'm going to be vlogging about breastfeeding tonight. Why don't you leave me some questions you have and I will try to get to them. And the response was overwhelming. You guys had some great questions. In fact, they are still coming in. So what I did was I filmed that video. I will link it down below if you want to check it out because I think it is pretty good. There are very different experiences between Hannah and William, so that's a good one to check out. But now I'm going to do a Q&A, a breastfeeding Q&A, and I'm going to get to some of these questions. And I haven't read through them all, so this is going to be a fly by the seat of your pants. Ready for some honesty? Okay, let's go, because I think we're going to get a little TMI up in here, just so you know. Okay. Lori asks, when you were working while breastfeeding Hannah, how did you wean off the pump? Okay, so I pumped in the morning before I went to work, and then 3 times while I was at work, because I worked a 10-hour shift, but I was gone for like 12 and a half hours because I had a long commute. So I pumped at least 4 times before dinner, and then sometimes I would, I definitely pump before bed as well. Forgot about that one. So I pump at least 5 times a day. And the way that I weaned off the pump, let's see. Oh, I remember. Okay, so I started having supply issues right around 9 months. I wasn't pumping enough. However, I knew when it was pumping time because my boobs would just engorge and get heavy. And so I knew when it was 9 o'clock, noon, and 2:30, 3 o'clock. Like, I knew. So the way that I went about weaning is first I dropped a pumping session. And I did that by dropping the lunch pumping session. So I would pump before work, and then I moved it to like 10 and 2. And then when I get home at 6:30, I would nurse, and then I would pump again at night. So I dropped 1 pumping session, so I was only pumping twice at work. And then I think I dropped the night pumping session. I just nursed Hannah before bed, and then pumped in the morning when I woke up. So I just started kind of slowly dropping pumping sessions, and I did that extremely slowly. The last thing I wanted to deal with was clogged ducts or mastitis, and so I think I dropped one about like every week. I dropped another one. Or I would, where normally I would pump for like 20 minutes, I only started pumping for like 15. So not only just dropping pumping sessions, but also just kind of decreasing the intensity of the pumping session and kind of slowly asking myself for less and less milk. Okay, the second question is from Sarah. Do you do bottles with William? Not really. Very, very rarely. Maybe I'll leave one if we have a babysitter, but that is like once in a blue moon. When do you plan to stop? William is 13 and a half months right now, and honestly, he's showing no signs of stopping. I think he might be going through a growth spurt right now because I'm pretty sure he nursed like 20 times today. Every time I turned around, he was like trying to crawl up in my lap and wanting to nurse. So he is definitely a boob man, and I don't see him stopping anytime soon. Does William still nurse to sleep or fall asleep on his own? Usually kind of what his bedtime routine is he takes a bath, then we take him out of the bath, we dry him off, put some lotion, diaper, PJs, he nurses, and then he runs around for like 10 minutes with Hannah, and then we put him to bed. So he doesn't nurse to sleep anymore, thank goodness. He just falls asleep on his own. If he doesn't nurse to sleep, how old was he when he learned to go to sleep? Learning to go to sleep was a big thing with him because he nursed so often. Probably until he was like a year, he was nursing as often as every like 90 minutes around the clock. So, I mean, I remember the nights when I was able to lay him down and he fell asleep without nursing to sleep. It was a huge victory, but for the most part, he really didn't nurse to sleep probably until he was about 10 or 11 months, maybe? Yeah, it was a long time. Lastly, with having such large boobs, yeah. Do you nurse one side or both? Bonus. Do you have sweating between your boobs? Okay. Big boobs. Awesome. So with William, usually I would just nurse on one side, and then the next time he would nurse on the other. Right now, he's going through this thing probably for the last 6 weeks where he's like double fisting my boobs. My shirt has to be up, both boobs have to be exposed, and he wants to like be able to go back and forth between both of them. And if I try to cover one side up while he's nursing, he gets mad and like defensive. Like he wants to have access. Those are his boobs. Like, don't touch. I'm nursing. I want both. I don't mind when we're home. It's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of funny. I think it sounds like Hannah's doing gymnastics upstairs. I don't know what she's doing. So now he nurses off both sides. But when he was little, he only nursed on one side. I think it's block feeding, right? Is that what they call it? It does kind of, not like long-term lopsidedness, but like right after he nurses, one side is definitely smaller than the other, so that kind of bugged me. But for the most part, it worked really well for us. And then as far as sweating goes, yeah, it gets a little sweaty. It gets a little humid sometimes. Okay, Jamie asks, did you ever take anything to increase your supply? What worked and what didn't? You know, honestly, I don't think anything didn't work. I think it all was kind of a cumulative effect of like helping me work with my supply. So I did mother's milk tea there's a lot of different brands, and I think all of them are great. I also took fenugreek to the point of smelling like a maple syrup factory, and I think that helped as well. And then what else did I do? Oh, lactation cookies, which include, you know, brewer's yeast and, it's totally, I can picture it in my head. Brewer's yeast and, oh no, I'm spacing out. What is that called? I can't remember what the ingredients are in lactation cookies that help with lactation. Brewer's yeast and I'm totally spacing out. I'm sure people will leave it in the comments below, but I will also link my video to how to make lactation cookies. It has the recipe and everything in it, and that's very useful. So if you're worried about supply, that's a good video to check out. If anything, you can be like, I'm eating these cookies to help my supply. Oatmeal is another great one. I basically just made like an oatmeal bar at my office. So I would have dried oatmeal, and then I would have like some brown sugar, dried cranberries, pecans, like all sorts of add-ins to put in my oatmeal so I could zhuzh it up and change it from day to day. But when I got to work, I would just make a bowl of oatmeal and check my email and eat my oatmeal. I'm sure it annoyed my coworkers, but I didn't like eating breakfast at 6 a.m. I wanted to eat breakfast at 7 a.m. and work started at 7 a.m. and so that just worked for me. I don't know. Do what works for you. So those are some things that I tried as far as like taking that I think helped me. Did you notice a change in Hannah after the frenectomy? How did you know she needed it, and how old was she? So I have a video up about it actually. And I want to say that it was done in April, and she was born in September. So October, November, December, January, February, March, April. So she was like 6-7 months old, I think. And I knew that she needed it because we had a consult done with an ENT, an ear, nose, and throat doctor, which is who, that's a good doctor to have perform it if you're going to have it done. And I also had a consult with a pediatric dentist. Now hers was so tight, I actually talked about this in the video I just filmed, but hers was so tight that it was distorting her smile. I kind of like pinned her lip down because it was just so tight. There's a band of skin. Anyways, I talk about it in the other video. Go check that out. But that's how I knew she needed it. It was distorting her smile. Both of the doctors agreed that it was extremely tight. And the pediatric dentist was concerned because of where it connected back behind her front teeth that it was going to actually cause some dental issues down the road. I had it. And I had it cut when I was probably about 8 years old, and I wish that my parents had cut it sooner because it actually did impact my baby teeth. Thankfully my adult teeth weren't affected because it was cut at the correct time, but my baby teeth were definitely affected, and I had a huge space between them. All that aside, as far as breastfeeding goes, she wasn't able to flange out her upper lip. She rolled it under, and so there was always a break in suction while she was nursing. And if you're ever nursing a baby and then you have them all of a sudden like break suction, it's like traumatic to your nipple. So it was really impacting our breastfeeding relationship. As soon as she got it cut, the next day it was healed fine. I mean, an hour after the procedure she was nursing. So the improvement we noticed was immediate. Truly immediate. There was no long-lasting effects of it. She was obviously pissed as soon as it was done because I mean that kind of hurts, but it was numbed up. I think it was just kind of awkward to have people playing in her mouth. She didn't understand what was going on. But I mean, an hour later when she was nursing, she was totally fine. So I have a whole video about that. I think it's called like Don't Cut My Baby. I should probably change the title so it makes more sense, but I will link that down below as well. Lactation cookies and Hannah getting her frenulum clipped. I'll link those down below. Okay, next question. Carrie, how do you plan on weaning? So with Hannah, we weaned because not only did she show signs of like, she was very independent. She was a very independent toddler. We already met our 1-year breastfeeding goal. So anything else on top of that was just gravy. She wasn't too keen on it. I was so ready to be done with pumping. And we also wanted to start trying to conceive. We went back to the doctor at when Hannah was a year old, and they would not start treatments until I had weaned. So we were all just kind of like, we came to the general consensus, her, me, and you know, Chris too, that it was time to wean. So we went about that process. And how do you plan on weaning? I kind of discussed that. It kind of works the same way with breaking, you know, weaning off the pump as well as weaning off the baby. You just kind of drop one feeding as the baby will allow, maybe not nurse for as long, that kind of thing, right? Just nice and slow. Oh my goodness, nice and slow. As far as William, I don't have any plans to wean him. I think I just discussed this. I've filmed so much today that I'm kind of starting to get confused of what I've included in this video and what was in the other video, but don't have any real signs of weaning him anytime soon. But I'm more inclined to go on his time frame now that I'm not having to worry about pumping and working and all that kind of stuff. As long as it works for me and it works for him, we're just kind of good to go. So he is definitely a boob man, and I don't see him stopping anytime soon. Do you have any issues nursing William? I know you had issues with Hannah and you used the SNS kit. So I just did a whole video about that. So I will link that on down below. I could never get past the painful part of breastfeeding. I was trying to find a good balance between pumping and exclusively breastfeeding, and I felt like I was either pumping or feeding the baby constantly. Is there a good medium? You know, I think when you're a stay-at-home mom and you're pumping a bottle and then feeding it to the baby, it definitely feels like you're doing it all the time. For me, it was different because I was at work pumping and my mom or Chris was at home feeding her a bottle of yesterday's milk. So I've never pumped while I was home and fed the baby, but I can definitely see that it would feel like you're doing it all the time, and trying to find a perfect medium. I think sometimes for the first 6 months when all they're eating is breast milk and you haven't introduced solids yet, it's gonna feel like you're doing it all the time. It really is. And basically it's just at that point it's just kind of your job. Like it's such a huge deal feeding them, right? So I can definitely understand how you would feel like you're doing it all the time. Once you start incorporating solids and they're not getting all of their caloric intake from the milk, I think it's easier, much easier to find that happy medium. And then sometimes when they're older, you're able to pump more, or you've pumped for so long that you know how to better express and empty your breasts, so you can go for a little bit longer between sessions. Then that kind of makes it a little easier. So, I mean, if you can pump both sides and you're getting 2 bottles, then that always helps, right? Sorry if that doesn't completely answer your question. Teething and biting issues. I have not really had very many biting issues. He's bitten me a couple times, but usually it's not, usually what happens is he's trying to smile up at me and his teeth just kind of catch me in a way and I'm like, ah! So Hannah bit me maybe a handful of times and William's just a couple, and really it's been inadvertent with everything. So I really haven't had any biting issues. Did you get your cycle back? If so, when, and is it normal? You know, honestly, I just got my cycle back maybe 2 weeks ago. So I was like 12 and a half, 13 months. I was 13 months postpartum when I got my first postpartum cycle. So because I'm only a couple weeks into it, I don't know if it's normal yet. So I guess we'll see in a couple months if it establishes itself or not. But I think with Hannah, I got my first cycle at probably about 9 months postpartum. So that's a difference. It's definitely a difference. After you had Hannah's frenulum clip, did it take a while for her lash to improve? I talked about this, but no, it improved immediately. That was from Jessica. Kelly asked, with William's reflux, did you avoid anything in particular with your diet? So, William had a milk protein sensitivity. Yeah. I should remember what the title, yeah, milk protein sensitivity. And the reason why I knew he had this is because when I would change his diaper after eating dairy, yogurt, that sort of thing, I would notice a lot of mucus in his stool. And as soon as I cut that out of his diet, and they say that, you know, dairy is kind of a trigger sometimes for reflux, so I was already thinking that I might need to cut that out. As soon as I cut it out, the mucus in the stool totally went away, but the reflux symptoms stayed. So I did an elimination diet. I cut a lot of stuff out. I mean, I was eating like boiled chicken. That's about it. And slowly started adding things back in, and we couldn't really find anything that was a culprit for his diet. for the reflux. The only thing that helped was getting him on medication, and as soon as he went on medication, the symptoms greatly improved. He still screamed all the time, but it wasn't necessarily in pain as much as it was before. So life before and after medication was just night and day. So much better. And I couldn't find anything diet related with breastfeeding that would help improve his reflux symptoms at all. So that was a bummer. All right, Casey asks, have you had to deal with milk blisters? No, I have not, and I'm really thankful for that. The only kind of issue that I've had with breastfeeding is I had a clogged duct one time, and it was awful, but I haven't had mastitis. Where is some wood? This is faux wood. This is kind of wood. Oh, this is wood. I'm gonna knock on all the wood I can. What is Hannah doing? It's like she's clogging up there. I haven't had mastitis. I've only had the clogged duct once. Have not had thrush. Seriously, I'm just gonna knock on wood the whole time I do this. No milk blisters, no real issues with biting, and no oversupply or like a painful letdown. The only thing that I've had, okay, I can stop knocking, is some low supply issues while I was pumping. I just don't really respond well to the pumps no matter what I did. So kind of overall, my experience breastfeeding has been pretty good. My kids have had some issues between the lip tie and reflux, but I've gotten off pretty easy, honestly. And then Gabriella asks, oh, did you go through any problems like reflux or oversupply? Sorry, that's already been asked. Yes, William had reflux, and I've not had oversupply issues. Well, you know what, actually, let's talk about that a little bit. So I had a low supply with Hannah, as I've mentioned multiple times in this video, but with William, he nursed a lot. He nursed every 60 to 90 minutes, truly. And because of that, and because my body got used to just constantly putting out milk, constantly, when he would nurse on one side, and I did block feeding, so he would nurse on one side, and then the next feeding he would nurse on the other. When he would nurse on one side, I would have a pretty heavy letdown on the other side, and I would leak a lot. I think I blocked this out of my memory because it was so awful. But it wasn't necessarily painful. It was just messy. If I wasn't wearing a breast pad 24/7, I would leak through my bra, shirt, sweater, jacket. Like I would just be like, milk would be running down my leg if I was standing. I had a lot of leaking issues with William, but I really think it was just because he was nursing a lot, and my body was just always making the milk. Because I mean, really, at the root of it, breastfeeding is supply and demand. So he was demanding a lot, and so I was supplying a lot. And when he wasn't nursing on that one side, it would start leaking on the other. Now, I mentioned before that he's kind of double fisting. He wants to nurse on both sides. So sometimes if he nurses on one side and I can feel the other side let down and maybe start to leak, or like feel like it's going to start leaking, I'll be like, William, hop on the other side. And he will gladly do that. So that kind of counterbalances. And I haven't really had to wear breast pads since probably about he turned a year. So a whopping like 6 weeks without them, and it's been great. But for the first year, I truly wore breast pads round the clock. So I think breastfeeding is one of those topics that you can talk about day and night, because there is just so many different experiences and little nuances to it. So thank you to all the girls that submitted questions. That was really, really sweet of you. Thanks for helping me out with this video. And if you have a question that I haven't touched on, feel free to leave it in a comment below. This is pretty easy. I just sit here and threw the camera up and turned my lights on, so I can totally do another breastfeeding Q&A if I have enough questions. Also, make sure you check out the videos that I linked down below. Hannah getting her frenulum clipped and the lactation cookies, as well as the video that I just filmed and posted about the nuances between Hannah and William's breastfeeding experiences. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you later. So for those of you that are new to my channel, let's go back and do just a little bit of a recap of what my experience was with Hannah, and then I'll talk about my experience with William. And let's start with just kind of comparing and contrasting what was going on in my life at that time.